Get out of here! You got an actual Padre to play first base and hit cleanup for our team?
Yep. Nate Colbert.
Hey everyone, this is Will O'Toole welcoming you to another edition, actually our second episode here in 2023, Park Ridge Sports History. I'd like to welcome you back from Christmas holiday vacation and wish you all the best in the new year. Hope everything is going well. We are going to talk, of course, about Nate Colbert. And actually, I thought this would be fun about the 69 San Diego Padres. But I do want to kind of highlight what did transpire over the weekend or prior to that last Monday night. And that was the unfortunate incident with Buffalo Bills defensive player Damar Hamlin. I'm just want to reference my notes. Damar Hamlin from the University of Pittsburgh, and of course he's been playing for the Buffalo Bills the last couple of years. Unfortunately, the incident on the field, and all our prayers go out to Damar and his family, and it looks like he is making a recovery. So that is great. And the only reason I want to bring that up is because I do want to bring to light an incident that happened way back in 1971. And that was a player by the name of Chuck Hughes. And I'm going to get to the others. And Chuck Hughes was a player who unfortunately had a heart problem and actually had a heart attack on the field during a game between the Detroit Lions and the Cleveland Browns. And Chuck Hughes, he's in a Eagles uniform here on this football card. I wasn't able to get one with the Detroit Lions, but he was a pretty good receiver at the University of Texas El Paso, which was when he was playing Texas Western. They changed their name in 1967 to UTEP. I kind of like that better. And was drafted out of UTEP or Texas Western as a wide receiver. Had some good years in college and then was drafted by the Eagles. Never really made anything with the Eagles, and then the Lions picked him up. And it looked like he was starting to have a career, Chuck Hughes, and then the unfortunate incident happened on the field between Cleveland and Detroit. So I just want to everyone to realize that football being a brutal sport, violent, yes, but fortunately, it looks like the Buffalo defensive back, Damar Hamlin, is making a recovery. And like I said, our thoughts and prayers go to him, his family, and the NFL, because it's always a reminder of how brutal this sport can be. It's a great sport. We know that it is a violent sport, but it is nonetheless a great sport that has really done wonderful things for the players who have participated, and of course for the fans who watch it rabidly each week. And just once again, our thoughts and our prayers go out to the Bills and of course Damar Hamlin. All right, with the unfortunate passing of this week of Nate Colbert at the age of 76, I'd like to take some time. I'm being prejudiced when I say this. Nate Colbert happened to be one of my favorite players. Now, look, when we were watching baseball in the 70s and even in the late 60s and to a certain extent the 80s, we didn't have all these baseball games going on simultaneously or even all these different networks. So getting information from the West Coast to the East Coast, remember those games were big. People don't realize this. The Mets and the Yankees used to have first pitch about 8:05. And the games used to end at 10:35. But even that being said, the West Coast games were still getting off at about 11 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. So many times when we picked up, and I grew up in Essex County, so we were either getting the Newark Evening News or the Star Ledger. Every once in a while I would pick up the Bergen Record or the New York Times or the Daily News. I remember, and this is just nostalgic now, I remember in 1971, for some reason, my father would go out at about 10:30 at night on a Saturday night, and he would pick up Sunday's papers. And it was great because it was always during the summer that he did this. So we were allowed to stay up and read the papers. And I can remember always spreading out the sports section on the floor and reading that. My father would have the Times or the New York Daily News or, like I said, the Star Ledger at that time, because the New York Evening News, I think, had gone under, and many of the writers went to the Ledger. Interesting history. Maybe I'll do that one day. Sports pages that we grew up with. Anyway, we buy the papers, and it was just great. But unfortunately, those papers came out too early for any West Coast. Even the afternoon games would be too late to be printed in the paper. So we didn't know that much about the players, except for, of course, Nate Colbert. And the reason why I knew so much about him was that my brothers and I would play this game, Sports Illustrated Baseball, kind of like the other card game based on dice and all the rest of it. We liked the other one, Sports Illustrated. And we had the 3 editions, 70, 71, 72. And of course, those were Colbert's great years with the Padres. So I always liked them because I used to play the Padres quite a bit. So I knew pretty much the roster of the 70 team, not as much as the 69. But Colbert was a solid player. I was reading about him as I came to the broadcast today. Chronic back problems really hurt him. And of course, Colbert is remembered for 2 things, at least in my mind. The 72 All-Star game. And of course, really the week after that, when he went down to same place, Atlanta Fulton County Stadium, and put on a monster demonstration, a doubleheader. And many baseball fans will know that he had 5 homers, 13 RBIs in a doubleheader sweep of the Atlanta Braves, which matched probably his boyhood idol, Stan Musial. And I saw an episode on Major League Baseball Network. They had it. And Bob Costas, who was doing a story on Nate Colbert, didn't know this, was at the games that Musial had this monster game himself. And here he is. I think it was, I'm going to say it was 1954. And here is Colbert 18 years later, matching Stan the Man's unbelievable night. Here's the interesting thing. Colbert in that series, first of all, the Padres stunk that year. It was 72. It was a strike shortened season. The Padres came into that game, ready for this. They were 8-20 in June, and probably their best month of the year was July, 12-12, when they played the All-Star game. They would lose 19 of 29 games in August. However, they actually won 5 straight games, courtesy of Colbert's great performance in that doubleheader on August 1st. Ready for this? Colbert in that series went 9 for 15, kind of cooled off in the 3rd game. He had 8 runs scored, 15 RBIs, but people don't know this. He actually had 6 home runs in that 4-game set against the Atlanta Braves. And he went into that series with not bad stats, even by, well, actually, they would be terrific stats by today's standards with the metrics and all the rest of it, not really paying attention to the batting average. But Colbert had been elected to the All-Star game, batting .233. He had 25 home runs, 69 RBIs. There was no one else on that team that you could actually commit to that you would say is an all-star. So, and he was a legitimate all-star. He had made the team the year before in 71 and also in 1970. He really bashed the ball. And you got to remember, Jack Murphy Stadium was not a great home run hitting venue. Oh, here's Colbert, 1972. Absolutely one of the ugliest uniforms going. And I will do, since we have ugly sweater, why don't we do ugly uniforms? Because I'll tell you, you can take the whole NBA season from 70 to 71. Those are the ugliest uniforms probably in the history of the NBA, with that little swerve. It looked like a racetrack going down many of the uniforms of some of the teams. The Atlanta Hawks particularly had some of the ugliest ones. But this, I think the all yellow was a bit much with the brown. Now, I do like the Padre brown. And in fact, I was a little upset with the team when they went to the blue. the dark blue with the gold. But this was 1972 with Nate Colbert. And it doesn't, the uniforms really don't do much in terms of accentuating a person's build. But Nate was 6'2", 200, maybe 215. We wouldn't want to mess with him. And actually, the baseball bat, 5 homers, 13 RBIs. Overall, he was 9 of 15. In that doubleheader, by the way, he was 7 of 9. And they just drilled the Atlanta Braves that year, or in those 4-game stretch. And like I said, they won 10 games in August. They won 5 straight to start out the month. And then really, when you think about it, they lost 19 of their next 24 games. But it wasn't really Nate Colbert's. And Colbert was always a good guy. He had a charity I was listening to that for kids. So I'm upset, of course, of his passing, but I really want to accentuate his life. He had 3 monster years for the Padres, and I just want to go to that. Ready for this? Actually, he starts out 1969. He was drafted by Houston. Originally, I believe, was signed by St. Louis. They were frustrated with his performance. How about this? Now I'm really going off on a tangent. Remember, please be patient with this. This is us sitting in the bar having a couple of hamburgers, or maybe 1 hamburger and a couple of beers. You decide. And we're talking all things sports, and things just, you start conversing and you remember this and this and this and this. And what I do remember, or reading about Colbert, was he's a St. Louis kid. He was drafted by St. Louis, but they were a little frustrated with, I guess, expectations. They let him go to Houston. Houston takes him, and this is my whole point. Sometimes you have a great manager, and sometimes you have a manager that just changes or wants to reconfigure you, whatever. And sometimes it works for some players, and sometimes it doesn't. And it's amazing how there are certain managers that really you click with, and others that, and you would think that, wow, I thought he would work or be magical with everyone. All right, getting to this. Harry Walker was the manager of the Astros and wanted really Nate Colbert to become a spray hitter. He thought he would be a better hitter as a spray hitter. And Colbert came up as a masher, as a power hitting first baseman, not with a lot of speed. And really, he took him out of what you could say his comfort zone. He probably should have left him alone. Why? Because the Astros really got frustrated with him. I was reading that, and actually a minor league season, he played in like 25 games. Now he's 18 or 19 years old. And in those 25 games, never took the field defensively. Served in most of them as a pinch runner. And I think was 0 for 7 as a pinch hitter, trying to adapt to Harry Walker's hitting philosophy. Now, in the 69 book, Ball 4, Harry Walker is well respected by the Astro players, the Doug Raiders, Jim Bouton, and all the rest of it, for his kind of funsical way of doing things. Also, he was very fundamentally sound. So here's a guy that was well respected by the Astro players for the most part. And yet, here's a player that he was trying to help, and it didn't work. He goes to the Padres, and he's excited about going to the Padres in the expansion. And who would? You're 20, 22, 23 years old. You've been frustrated in one organization, actually in 2, and one was probably your favorite team as a kid. And now you go to the Padres, you have redemption. You have a chance now to prove your worth. And he does. Actually, doesn't technically. I was looking this up, and I'm going to go through the 69 Padres. Does not start the first game for the Padres. It went to a guy by the name of Bill Davis, who I'd never heard of. And again, this is why I love doing this show, because it puts me on an odyssey, really, of a real journey of baseball sports research. And Bill Davis was a big 6'7" guy from the University of Minnesota, who in the early 60s helped Minnesota, the Golden Gophers, to the College World Series. And apparently, and I forget his name right now, his manager was one of the first coaches to integrate. And his roommate, because I think Davis also played basketball, kind of like Dave Winfield at Minnesota, was Archie Clark, who I remember as a kid being a guard for the Baltimore Bullets. And I remember I always thought he had a pretty cool name, Archie Clark, because you grow up with the Archies back in the 70s, the music group, and then the cartoon comic book. And he was a roommate. Anyway, he gets drafted, I think, by Cleveland, doesn't do anything there, is drafted or picked by the San Diego Padres, starts first base, and doesn't last. He is soon, that first baseman spot is soon taken by Nate Colbert. And ready for this, in those first few years when the Padres really don't have much, from 69, and I'm going to say this, to 73, so that's 5 good seasons. Colbert hit 24 homers, 38, 27, 38, and 22. And I think in 1973, the following year in 74, he has 14 home runs. And I think that's where the chronic back issues really come into play. Probably would have been able to survive a little bit longer. Remember, he winds up at Detroit, probably playing mostly DH. Yes, he does. But doesn't last that long. Probably with today's medicine, he probably could have really done something with the back issues and maybe had 3-4 more good seasons. But even so, he had 2 monster years. Probably his best season was 72. He hit 250 that year, 38 home runs, 111 RBIs, actually stole 15 bases and drew 70 walks. So you know that, and actually probably because, and you can't say he was their best hitter, their best thumper in the lineup for San Diego. But really, when you think about it, not bad. He drew 45 walks in 69, 56, 63, 70, and 54. And then even in his down year in 74, Colbert drew 62 walks. All right. Not a bad on-base percentage. Every year over 300. All right. Mashed the ball, like I said. Did finish in the MVP voting in 72. Probably much of it due to that one night, 5 homers, 13 RBIs. Can you imagine? You know, it's amazing. We talk about the 5 home runs, 13 RBIs, and it is truly amazing. And then you realize that Sonny Jim Bonley drove in 12 runs in one day also, but in one game. So it's just one of those things, pretty amazing. But he comes out really of that series, and everybody on the East Coast kind of knows him. So I'm not saying it did much more for his career other than people are saying, wow, they have a pretty decent player in San Diego and Nate Colbert. The week prior to that, though, I'll tell you this. He does come on the national stage because in extra innings, he walks in the 72 All-Star game and scores the winning run for the National League. Actually, Joe Morgan drove him in from the Reds. So those, in a span of a week, he really comes to the national attention of all baseball fans, not just San Diego and not just, crazy kids like me collecting baseball cards and playing Sports Illustrated Baseball with my brothers. But Colbert has that one, how many players wouldn't take that one glorious moment in the spot like that? 5 homers, 13 RBIs, 7 of 9. That's a career for many players. And for Colbert, man, that was just one day in a pretty good career. I didn't realize this. I'm still amazed at this. He's the all-time home run leader for the San Diego Padres. He actually hit 163. I am amazed that this franchise, after 50 some odd years in baseball, still has not had a player total 200 career home runs. Now, I know the Jack Murphy Stadium was not a very good ballpark to hit in, but still, even in the 90s, when we had home runs galore, you would think that the Padres would have somebody with at least 200 home runs. But like I said, he remains the all-time home run Padre, and he is in their Hall of Fame. And with the Padres, he hit a solid 253. He played with Montreal and Houston, Detroit, and Oakland. Actually, when you think about it, sometimes you think of Oakland as an expansion team because they've moved so much. But he played on 3 expansion teams. And I think he and Rusty, because Rusty played with Houston, Montreal, and the Mets as well. I can't remember. He played with Detroit, goes back to the Mets. Yeah, I think Ron Fairley played with Toronto, Montreal. I can't think if he played with anybody else. But I am sure that Nate is one of the few that have played on 3 expansion or more teams. I got to look that up one day. What players played on the most expansion team? But that's Nate Colbert. Now, I'd like to do this. Just go and talk about a little bit about that 69 San Diego team because I think it would be a little fun. First of all, he was their all-star in 1971, 72, and 73. I believe that the all-star player for the 70 team, if I can remember, might have been Ollie Brown. Nope, it was the other guy I was thinking of, Cito Gaston. Now, on that 69 team, ready for this? It's a pretty interesting team. First of all, they stink. They're terrible. They're 52 and 110. They finish in last place. But to be fair to the Padres, they actually win their first 3 games as an expansion team. They sweep the Houston Astros. They actually win the first game 2-1. And I have mentioned this before. I did a show where I had expansion team home runs, the first ones in history. Ed Spezio, whose son would play for the world champion St. Louis Cardinals. Ed Spezio would hit the first home run. It would tie the game on opening day against the Astros, 1-1. And the Astros and the Padres would squeak another run across the plate to win their very first game in their franchise history, 2-1. Spezio hits the first home run. But then they win the next 2 against the Astros. So you're saying, wow, kind of like the Seattle Pilots. They won quite a few games. But then it goes all downhill from that. They only win 49 of the next 159 games that they play to finish 52 and 110. And this is what I'm saying. To be fair to that team, ready for this? In 1969, when baseball split, the aforementioned Houston Astros probably got hurt big time by losing those first 3 games. They finished 81 and 81. But had they finished 84 and 78, ready for this? This is what happened to them. Let me just get it here. The Padres finished in last place, 41 games behind. But that's not so bad because the Expos, also an expansion team, even winning with an identical record, they finished 48 games behind the Mets. Here's why that Astro team losing that game, those first 3 games, might have cost them the division. I'm not saying it would have, but they would have finished 84 and 78, which would have finished. It's still technically they would have finished in 5th place in the National League West. But when you think about it, the Braves only had 93. So who knows? You get those 3 wins there, and maybe you're talking real pressure on the Braves. Who knows? Maybe the Astros with Wilson and Durker, with Doug Rader, Johnny Edwards, Joe Morgan, might have been able to do something else late in the season. That being said, those Padres were a terrible team. And the reason why I bring up Ollie Brown is that he is actually the very first person that was drafted by the San Diego Padres in 1969. However, let's get to Cito Gaston. And the reason why I have 2 pictures of Gaston, this is 71, this is 72. Notice how he changed his stance. The shame of it is I didn't get a 70 card. And I think it's because he wasn't in a batting stance. It would have been interesting because Gaston in 69, he was on that team. Cito Gaston hit 2 homers, 28 RBIs. The next year, playing basically full time, played 146 games. Gaston had a good season. Ready for this? 29, 93, .318 batting average, and he had 9 triples, and he makes the All-Star team. I don't believe he appears. But then take a look at this. In 71, he hit 17 homers, 61 RBIs with a .228 average. Now he raises his stance in this baseball card picture. And I don't think it helps him because by 72, he's at 744, although he's has his batting average 40 points higher at 269. So he was up and down with the power numbers. But what Cito Gaston is most known for is that he takes Toronto to the promised land not once, but twice, and wins the World Series in 92 and 93 with a team that was really incredible when I think about it. Roberto Alomar, Dave Winfield coming in, being a serviceable veteran player, Paul Molitor being a big-time player on that team, Pat Borders, their catcher, number of great stud pitchers. Tom Henke, I think, was on those teams. Just a really solid team. Had great outfield play. Just a really solid baseball team. And had talent that had to be managed, and it was managed well by Clarence Cito Gaston. Now, here's another player I got to mention. And, of course, it's Ollie Brown. Now, I took the 67 picture because this is the reason why he was probably taken by the Padres, simply because he had no room. There was no room at the inn for Ollie Brown in Candlestick Park. And that first year, Brown has a solid year, played 150 games, and when he was given full-time status, he was 20 home runs, 61 RBIs, with a 264 average. Solid, especially for an expansion team. With the Giants prior to that, in 67 with this picture, he played 120 games, had 13 homers, 53 RBIs, 267. But I'm sure that the Giants knew they had Bobby Bonds coming up. They also had a guy named Ken Henderson, and I'm sure that they were also thinking about Dave Kingman in their minor leagues. So if they had to get rid of one player, here it was, the Giants, who had a plethora of great slugging players in the 60s. Talking about Jim Ray Hart, of course, Willie Mays, Willie McCovey, Orlando Cepeda, and soon to be Bobby Bonds, and then Dave Kingman, because Dave Kingman had over 450 some odd home runs. Just couldn't, batting average. He would be a great player today. I'm telling you right now, he'd be the Joey Gallo of baseball today, like he was then. Although he did have some good seasons. He had 1 or 2 good seasons where he was really dangerous. Drew a ton of walks, even had a decent batting average. But Al Ferrara is the guy I want to talk about, because Ferrara, and probably has one of the best and most honest quotes about why he wanted to be a Major League Baseball player, and I saw it in Ball 4, and that's why I loved it so much. Al Ferrara stated he always wanted to see his picture on a baseball card. Now, I got to be very honest with you. What kid playing baseball, whether it's wiffle ball or stickball or sandlot baseball or little league or travel baseball, one of his dreams, egotistically, is to see his baseball picture on a baseball card. And I think his honesty should be respected here. Now, he played for the Dodgers. He played for the Padres. Really just a pinch hitter, bench player. This is the 69 card, though, from the Topps collection. And I had to get that one. I do like the San Diego on top with the brown hat. Looks good. All right. And you can tell it's brown as opposed to, let's say, black of the Giant player right there. And, of course, I had to put in Al Santorini. Al Santorini, of course, played for the Cardinals and also the Padres. But if you're a New Jersey high school baseball fan, you'll know this. Santorini actually matriculated at Irvington High School. And back in the 60s and probably late 50s, 60s, and early 70s, they didn't have all these county tournaments. but they did have the Greater Newark Tournament, as it was called, and it's since been called the Essex County Tournament. Al Santorini faced off with his Union High School club against the Parsippany high school team that was led by future baseball player Richie Zisk. And they played at Doc Goltz Field in Verona. Now, I didn't see the game. I'm just telling you this from baseball fans at the time who saw everyone play. And I think Santorini struck out Zisk a couple of times in the game. And I believe that Irvington, but I think Parsippany won the contest. But Al Santorini goes to the San Diego Padres, and in '69 never really has the career that many New Jersey fans were hoping for. He pitched for Atlanta, San Diego, and St. Louis. I do remember having, I think, a '71 St. Louis card, and everyone making a big deal that, wow, he's from New Jersey and all the rest of it. Santorini was 17-38 in his career. Probably his best season was with the Cardinals. No, actually with San Diego in '69. I got to give him credit. He was 8 wins, 14 losses. Not bad ERA of 3.95. Pitched 184 innings. Hey, listen, he played. I didn't. 99.9% of the American male population in the United States are in my side. This guy played 17-38 career. I'd take that. 4.29 ERA. Like I said, might have been, who knows? I always like to think that if these players are on different teams, and it's always the big if. I know. It's the smallest word, probably one of the smallest words in the English language, but it means so much. If, if I was born 6'6", 250 pounds, and could run like a gazelle, I'd be playing in the NFL. I get that. But, sometimes, like I was saying about Nate Colbert, if you meet that right coach or you just happen to play for that right team at the right moment, your career could have really taken off. I mean, think about it. Colbert had played, let's say, as the first baseman for the Pirates instead of Bob Robertson. How lethal would the Lumber team been then? Not that Robertson was a bad player. He was an excellent player for a couple of years there. Right? Or let's say he played with Atlanta in '69 and '70 and '71. Atlanta won the Western Division in '69. Could they have competed in '70 and '71 and '72 against the Reds? Well, '71, the Reds were 500, under 500. I think you understand. Could Colbert have done this? Imagine him with the '69 Mets instead of the '69 Padres. Maybe he would have been the MVP instead of Don Clendenon in the World Series. So it's a big if, all right? Same thing with Santorini. All right, now, I mentioned one manager on that team, and I did say that Preston Gomez was the first manager, but there was also another future manager on that team who would take Preston Gomez's position, and that was Don Zimmer. And this is Zimmer with the 55 Brooklyn Dodgers baseball card. And, of course, Zimmer, for many Yankee fans, he's beloved. He was on those World Championship teams in the late 90s, the Core 4 group. This is a 55 Dodger card. I can't say without looking up, and I didn't bother looking it up. I'm sure that he has a ring from that World Series team. He wasn't getting into the starting lineup. He is an original Met, 62. He does have some horrific hit by pitch where he was hit in the head, had a metal plate inserted from a terrible beaming in baseball when he was at the plate. He's probably the chief reason why the players have mandatory batting helmets today. And remember that actually the last player, I do know this, they used to have a plastic or a metal lining that they could insert into their cloth baseball caps. They were allowed to do that. And Bob Montgomery, I believe, of the Boston Red Sox was the last one to wear that type of protection. And now, of course, not only is it the helmet, but they have the almost the chin and ear guard on both sides. I remember that Yaz used to have the one flap on the one side. I just thought that was kind of cool. But things have changed. And for safety's sake, probably for the better. I was just looking at a YouTube of, it's funny how things change. Seeing Babe Ruth get hit by a pitch, and it's just a little, and probably does hurt. 98, everyone thinks I was an off-speed pitch. Off-speed pitches are coming at the very least 70 miles an hour from 60 feet away. So 70 miles an hour, and Babe Ruth just brushes it off and shows it off to the pitcher on the mound. Don't know who the pitcher was. It was just a quick camera bite. Anyway, that first manager, and I'm going to get to this too, first manager was Preston Gomez. Now, Gomez, unfortunately, was saddled with, for the most part, mediocre players. I don't think there's any way I can say it differently. Yes, some of those players become integral parts of championship teams, like a Clay Kirby and like a Joe Niekro, who I want to really spend some time with because I'll never understand that. But as a collection, sometimes the mediocrity rises instead of their special gifts that they can give to a winning ball club. But Preston, what impressed me about Preston is that he does go on to be a third base coach. Well, I think he starts as the third base coach, works his way. But he actually supposedly had individual signs and signals for players on each and every team. And his reasoning was, look, I could have you today. You could be traded to, let's say, the Minnesota Twins, because I think he was doing it with the California Angels. You could be with us today, get traded tomorrow, and now you know all of our signals. But if I just concentrate on giving you one player the signals, I'd have a list or a catalog of 24 different signs and languages for that particular guy and all particular players on the team. I don't have to worry about you maybe stealing our signs. So it's an impressive thing that you can have basically know 24 baseball languages, because that's what signals are. It's a language within a language of sport. It's pretty impressive. And he was able to do that. Now, the reason why I want to show you this, I loved when they took these pictures. This is 72. Actually, this is the year he's fired, and Zimmer takes over for the San Diego Padres. And I was trying to look. I couldn't find it. There is a picture of Don Zimmer. You have to really, if you think Colbert looks terrible in this uniform, imagine a guy who was nicknamed the Gerbil by Bill Lee. Imagine Don Zimmer in an all-yellow outfit, in a picture with the brown piping or striping going down the pants. It's not really good. These San Diego Padre uniforms aren't so bad, though. The white with the San Diego, I like the lettering of the San Diego Padres. Listen, and I'm being prejudiced when I say this, they have one of the best logos with the Padre swinging the baseball bat in his garb and in his sandals. It's a great logo. I'm so glad that they brought it back. I wish they would put it on their baseball hats, maybe as a, maybe a throwback, or I wish they would put it as a permanent patch on their uniforms. It's a great one. And the fella on top, I know Met fans will know who he is. This is Chris Cannizzaro, and the other fella is by the name of Clay Kirby. Now, Kirby was a pitcher, and he's wearing a batting helmet. Now, what I know about Kirby is this. Kirby, of course, he actually was pitching a no-hitter and lost it and was actually taken out of the game. He was losing the game 1-0, courtesy of a walk, an error, and a wild pitch. He's losing the game going into the 9th inning, and actually the manager, Preston Gomez, replaces him in the game instead of just, at that point, just let him pitch the no-hitter. But he didn't get the first no-hitter in Padre history. That wasn't until Musgrave Just did it a couple of seasons ago. Anyway, Kirby does go and pitches for the Reds. He's on the 75 World Series team. Interesting thing, and if you ever, I'm pretty sure it's Kirby, but Johnny Bench talks about how Anderson puts him up in the bullpen, but it was a decoy because apparently he had broken his arm and was not available for the World Series, and the Reds did not want the Red Sox to know of the injury. So Clay Kirby, 10-6 one year for the Reds in 75 and gets a World Series ring. But this fella, Chris Cannizzaro, he is not only plays for the expansion Met team, but he plays for the 69 San Diego franchise expansion team. And he's actually, so all you trivia buffs out there, the very first All-Star in Padre history. And in my last minute and a half, I want to talk about this guy, Joe Niekro. I will never, but then this is bizarre anyway by the Cubs. Do you realize that he won 24 games for the Cubs and they let him loose? They trade him to the Padres. And of course, I'm not saying that he was a great pitcher. He was definitely a serviceable pitcher. He wins 20 games. He pitches for those Astro teams of the 80s. I do believe that he pitched for either the 87 or 91 Minnesota Twins and gets a World Series ring. He is a knuckleball pitcher. And we'll talk about knuckleball pitchers in the future because Bill James had an interesting comment about that one time. Thinks that knuckleball pitchers are never taken seriously and they wind up on crummy teams because they're an afterthought. And as we can see, it's an effective pitch. But Niekro was on that 69 team. My whole premise is this. Why did the Cubs ever get rid of him? It wasn't like they got anyone back of worth in the trade. But it just goes to show you how mediocre front office management was of the Chicago Cubs, having at one point 5 Hall of Famers and losing 100 games, 5 Hall of Famers and never even sniffing the pennant. Hey everyone, this is Will O'Toole thanking you again for joining me on Park Ridge Sports History. Shout out to Howard Fredericks, who has really been a godsend helping produce the show. I'll see you next week with another edition. And again, happy